It's time that we talked about food. I haven't made a video in a while because I've been busy. I was off on honeymoon. I was gallivanting around Thailand. And I really need to make a video about traveling with arthritis as well because, man, psoriasis and arthritis in the sun really, really helped. And then as soon as I got home, it was a disaster. So we'll talk about that in another video. But I've been dragging my feet on this video for a while because, well, to jump straight in, talking about food is hard. I mean, I've talked about food in bits and pieces in other videos. I've given some suggestions around food and diet and eating and stuff like that. But food is actually really, really hard to talk about. And it's hard for a number of reasons that I'm going to go through here. First off, it's an emotional topic for many people, and this is completely understandable. When you think about it, eating is one of our most primitive urges. There is very little other than maybe breathing that our bodies kind of scream at us to do. Get food, eat. You need it. You will not survive if you don't have it. We've spent most of our existence as animals, all of our ancestors, all of that stuff, just basically spending our days just getting food and consuming food because that is what we do. You look at animals, that's what they do. They go look for food. It is a primitive urge. So it is, I think as a society, it's kind of interesting. I think we need to be really careful when it comes to primitive urges because they're buried so deep in that kind of animalistic part of our bodies that they're very easy to exploit, and they seem to be really solid avenues for not only exploitation but for like psychological issues and stuff like that, right? Speaking of which, we talk about good food and bad food all the time. We say this is good food, that's bad, this is good for you, that is bad for you. You might eat, quote, good food and look at someone who's eating bad food and think they're bad people because they're eating bad food, or you might say, oh, you shouldn't eat that, that's bad. Naturally, when you're throwing around things like good and bad, right, there's going to be a lot of emotional weight attached to that. Because of course there is. If you're telling someone what you're eating is bad, it's very easy to interpret as, oh, I'm a bad person. Oh, okay, well, that doesn't feel very good, right? And as a result, we see all sorts of disordered eating. And disordered eating is a very real and very scary thing. Eating too much, eating not enough. It can be very difficult to understand if you've never been in that place before. But it is a very, very scary thing. And I think culturally we do a lot to really make disordered eating a thing that exists that, it would be really nice if it didn't exist. So yeah, I think the emotional side and the psychological side, everything emotional, psychological around food just makes it really, really hard to talk about. I remember there was a TV show in the UK called Super Size versus Super Skinny. I think you can find all the videos on YouTube, and it actually doesn't stand up too well by today's standards. It seems pretty harsh and crass, but they used to take someone that was overweight and someone that was underweight, and they would have them swap diets and kind of live together for a few days so that they could see the extreme opposite of their own disordered eating. And unsurprisingly, every single episode, every person that was involved had some sort of emotional, psychological issue, and that it doesn't matter what information you gave about food. It doesn't matter if you give diet plans, all that sort of stuff. Unless you solve and get to the root of the emotional issue, you're not going to make any progress beyond that. So it's a very emotional issue. That makes it hard to talk about, and it has made me kind of drag my feet on actually talking about it for a while. Another reason that food is difficult to talk about is for economical reasons. So different people have wildly different access to food or to different types of food. So depending on your income, you may not be able to afford high quality, organic, fresh food. Depending on where you live and whether you have access to transport, you may not actually be able to go to somewhere where you can buy these, healthier, good foods. So if I sit here and tell you, you should eat this and you should do that, and this is how you eat properly, in quotes, you might be looking at me going, well, I can't do any of that, right? Because of where I live, because of the money I have, whatever else. So it makes it kind of hard to talk about food. It's also hard to talk about because there are really big, well-funded industries trying to get you to eat what they are producing. Of course they are, right? If you are the president of some large company that makes a lot of money and there's thousands of people working there and they've all got jobs and you're trying to, maintain your profits or whatever, because of course you are, that's your job. You want people to eat your foods, and whether those foods are bad in terms of societal health is not necessarily a concern. And it has actually been shown that studies that are funded by the food industry tend to be biased and favor the food industry. Big shock, I know, but the reality is the result is that there's a lot of information out there that is maybe confusing, maybe biased, whatever it is. There's a lot of information out there that's confusing, and it makes it harder to talk about food and, where, what is kind of the way as a society we should think about food and look at food and eat and all of that sort of stuff. And lastly, very weirdly, it has gotten political, right? Like, I think this is more so in the US, but I think the US tends to leak out into the rest of the world, which is unfortunate in many ways. It's positive in many ways too, but it is unfortunate in a lot of ways. And, there's this kind of image of like a steak eating conservative versus a weak liberal vegan or something, right? And food kind of plays this weird political role these days. And it's just kind of bizarre to me. But all of this stuff, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons, I'm sure, but all of this stuff kind of makes it hard to talk about food. So when I'm going to talk about food today, I want to focus on arthritis. I want to talk about food in general. I'm going to talk at a very high level. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm not going to tell you anything specific, really. I'm just going to talk about food in general that will hopefully frame it in a context that's useful for some people. And after I'm done talking about food, I've got some exciting news. So stay tuned to the end of the video for that. If you like the channel, I think you will be interested in what's coming. So first off, what is food? And this sounds like a really, really stupid question, but I actually think it's something that's worth thinking about, right? When you go to the store and you look at something like, I don't know, Frosties or Cocoa Pops, or if you look at like chocolate bars or something like that, it's very easy to lose sight of what food actually is. Like, a lot of food is marketed to us and displayed in a way that's kind of, we're meant to look at it and feel excited by it. We're meant to want to buy it. And then when we put it in our mouth, it's meant to feel good and we're meant to enjoy it. And it kind of elicits all these kind of very emotive responses. But food in reality is what our bodies are made of. And they contain all the kind of nutrients and vitamins and minerals that allow our bodies to actually function, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that we get from food that our body needs to do things like hormone signaling and all this sort of stuff. Like, if you ever look at bodybuilders, they always talk about protein all the time. Why? Well, because protein is what is used to actually build your muscles, right? So if you want big muscles, you need to eat enough protein to actually grow your muscles. So your bodies are made from the things that we get from food, right? Amino acids, all these other things. And not only is it built from it, the functioning of the body is facilitated by all of the minerals and vitamins and all of that sort of stuff. So you quite literally are what you eat. And I think today we lose sight of that again in the world of marketed food. We lose sight of the fact that what you put in your mouth is the building blocks of your body. When you look at a baby, whether it's a baby human, baby animal, whatever it is, and you look at milk is a substance that is perfect for taking a baby and growing it out into a bigger thing, right? Lots of calories, fat, protein, all of these things that will allow a child to effectively grow, right? So you are what you eat, and I think that's an important thing to understand, that is literally true, right? For your body to function well, the food that you eat is important. Now, food and arthritis. Inflammatory arthritis and various other inflammatory conditions. If you do some reading on this and do some research, it's generally accepted that the conditions or disease is triggered by both genetic and environmental factors. So your genetics or your genes, these things in your body that's kind of controlling how your body is, being built and how, the biological processes are actually operating. You can't really control this, right? You have the genes you have. You can blame your parents or you can thank your parents for that. But there's an environmental factor to this too. And there's an environmental factor to your genes. So it turns out that you may have a gene in your body that is responsible for something, but whether or not that gene gets expressed, whether or not it is active, is a different thing, right? And this can be influenced by your environment. So, for example, you might have a gene that is, related to the functioning of your immune system. And you might live somewhere where actually, that gene is lying dormant. And then you could change your environment. Like, let's say you move from a very rural, nature-filled place where you're only eating organic stuff and whatever it is. And let's say you move to a highly polluted city and you start just eating nothing but junk food. That change in environment could cause differences in gene expressions, right? So it's important to understand that food can have this impact. And the reason is that you and your environment are inextricably linked, okay? Like, if you take a human and take them out of the environment that they need to survive in, they will die. We know this. If you take a human, put them in the vacuum of space, they will just die because we need our environment. We depend on our environment. Now, you wouldn't really know this by the way we tend to behave. We kind of treat our environment like shit. But without the environment that we live in, that we've evolved in over, tens or hundreds of thousands of years, or, millions of years for animals at large, without that environment, the reality is we and our environment are one. We are connected very, very deeply. And there's a few ways you connect to your environment, right? So when you breathe, you are taking in oxygen, you're taking in various other things, they're going into your lungs, and that air and the oxygen is going into your bloodstream, that is going to your muscles, and this is what's helping your muscles actually produce energy. And there's a whole lot of other processes. So breathing is literally taking what is outside your body, your environment, and bringing it into your body, and then it's being used in a bunch of processes, and then waste material is being expelled back into the environment, right? Eating, drinking, we'll talk about more in a minute, but physical touch, and I've put there in brackets poisonous frogs. You can absorb things from your environment even through your skin. There are frogs, I think in South America, that even if you just touch them, it's enough for their poison to kill you, right? And I think hunters would take arrow tips and they would rub them on the frog and they would use that to kill animals. So our environment gets into our body through multiple different vectors. So you're essentially opening up your insides to the outside world. Now, when you think about your body, so that's your environment. When you think about your body, you, in grossly simplistic terms, you are a fleshy tunnel, right? You have a mouth, which is the entrance to the tunnel, and there's an exit to the tunnel that we're not going to go into too much detail on. But the point is, there is an entry point, and then there's a whole big long tunnel. It's essentially an unbroken thing that's controlled by a few different gates, called sphincters and various other things. But you're a tunnel. There's an entry and there's an exit, and that is your biggest exposure to the outside world, right? You take things from the environment, you put them in your mouth. They work their way through the tunnel that is the inside of your body, which is giving your insides massive exposure to the outside environment, right? You're taking things from outside and you're literally just putting it in your body. Now, your body has all manner of protections to so it tries to absorb all of the good stuff, the proteins, the nutrients, all of that sort of stuff, but it also tries to protect you from the bad stuff, right? And the way your body does this, for example, we have a lining in our intestines that will try and prevent certain things from being absorbed into the bloodstream. You have an immune system that actually try and kicks in and fight when something does get into your body and starts causing problems, right? Now, sometimes things go wrong. So there's a phenomenon called leaky gut, and this is where something called tight junctions in your gut breaks down. There are lots of speculations as to what causes this. It could be related to things like pesticides, where the impact of the pesticides that you're consuming by virtue of consuming food will break down these things called tight junctions, and these tight junctions will then be allowing things through the gut wall that shouldn't be allowed through, and that is then triggering excessive responses from your immune system. Right, that's just kind of one example, but the point is you're taking the outside world, you're putting it in your body, and that is giving the kind of system that is your body massive exposure to the outside world. Now, the reason this is important is, like I said, we've got the environmental factors and the genetic factors, and food is a massive environmental factor because, like I said, you're taking your environment into your body. So I was just trying to frame and kind of contextualize food, right? Because when we think about food in that kind of broader sense, it's now a bit different than should I eat mostly protein? Should I eat vegan? Should I eat nothing but meat, right? All of those sorts of questions. Well, now it's getting a bit more broad because it's all right, we've got this whole internal system in our body. We've got all of these external systems. They're all working together and it's all quite complex. And then, the question that you have to ask is, well, what should you eat? And the answer, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know. What should you eat? I have no idea. And no one else does really. We have some ideas, we have studies, there is the science, right? But like I said, talking about food, it's difficult. Different bodies, I could say to you, the healthiest populations in the world all eat nuts. But if you're allergic to nuts, you might eat a nut and die, right? So it's very difficult to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution. I think a good start, probably fiber, protein, water. These are good things. Your body needs proteins to build and repair. It needs fiber for a healthy gut, and you need water to stay hydrated. So they're probably a good start. And foods that are high in these things, meat, fish, nuts, legumes, vegetables, broccoli, carrots, all that sort of stuff, and just water. When you stop and think about those foods, well, those are all foods that humans have been eating for like hundreds of thousands of years, and our ancestors before that have been eating in similar ways. So it's probably pretty safe to say that that's a pretty good place to start, right? Like we haven't really had processed foods all that long in terms of human history. So if you want to start somewhere, that's probably a good place to start. Should we eat organic? Probably. I mean, I think so. I think pesticides and look at it like this. You've got a bunch of plants. There's bugs eating your plants. That's a problem. So you spray all this shit over them that kills the bugs. Great. Now that shit is then, if it's going to kill a bug is a living thing, and there's lots of living things. We're all living things. The soil is full of living things. To think that there's no side effects from doing that is crazy. So whether or not there's more nutrients in the food, whether you'll be healthier by eating organic food, I don't know. But it just seems to me like a no-brainer that we should be doing everything possible to not fill our environment with poison. Because as we already talked about, our environment is inextricably linked, our outside or inside. It's all part of kind of one big giant functioning system. Why we run a poison parts that system? I don't know. Well, I do know. We want to produce a lot of food, but I don't think pesticides is the right way to do it. Again, money, access, these are problems. So that can be a problem for some people. Another thing that I think when thinking about food is think about how you feel after eating as well as during. Like we like to eat food, like before we eat food, we want it to look nice, we want it to smell nice. And then when we're eating, we want to feel good in our mouth. We want to, there's all of these kind of, there's the pleasurable side that goes with food, but also think about how do you feel afterwards, right? Like if you are in work, say during the day, or you're in school or whatever, and at lunchtime you go and you eat loads of pizza and then you go back to work. I mean, are you feeling good, right? Are you focused? Are you feeling, ready to work? Or do you want to just go for a nap, right? So thinking about how you feel after food, I think gives a really good indication of what you should be eating for you personally, right? I know that if I eat a salad with some tofu or with some salmon or something like that in the salad, I will probably feel pretty good and alert, awake. I don't want to go for a nap. I don't want to lie down. So I kind of would generally put that in the bucket of, this is good food for me. But the bottom line is you need to figure this out for yourself. And I don't mean that you need to answer every single question yourself. Go online, do some research, try some different things and figure out what works for you. I'm not saying you're on your own. It's just that you need to be able to take a lot of different information and figure out, okay, well, these are the bits of information that I can put to work for me personally. And of course, you can pay a nutritionist or dietitian to help you figure all this stuff out, right? I like generally what Michael Pollan said, which was eat food, not too much, mostly plants. He had a series on Netflix about food that I think is worth watching. I think generally as a mantra, that's pretty good. I'd probably say eat real food. By real food, I mean like the vegetables, fish, meat, all that sort of stuff. Because, I mean, you could argue that when you go to a shop and buy something that's really, really highly processed, you could argue that it's not food, really, right? By certain definitions of food. But generally, I think that's a pretty good statement. And the final thing I would say is learn to cook. I mean, I think as an adult in the modern world, like that is just a really important skill to have. Like learn to cook. Because first off, you can learn to cook. The better you are at cooking, the more efficient you can be. So you can plan, you can prepare, you can do meal prep, you can do all that sort of stuff. As you get better at doing it, you can make better food. A lot of times, even if I go to a restaurant, I actually prefer the food that I make myself a lot of the times. You can save money by doing it. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't learn to cook. It's a really, really great skill to have. And that's pretty much all I have on food. Please leave any questions in the comments. Like I said, this is hard to talk about. I'm not going to tell anyone what to eat or what not to eat. You are hopefully maybe an adult. If you are an adult, just be an adult and figure this stuff out. And, I think if anyone's offering you easy answers when it comes to food, it's like, eat this food, or this is a superfood, or this is a magic food. No, it's just not. There are far too many variables here. It's a difficult thing to talk about. In any sort of absolute terms. In fact, anyone talking in any sort of absolute terms, you should probably just disregard what they're saying. The world is very grey, not black and white. Anyway, that's all I've got about food. Like I said, sensitive, difficult topic. If you've got anything you want to share in the comments, please do. I've said this before in videos. We are a part of a community. that we don't necessarily want to be a part of, but I think it helps to just share things, what has worked for you, what hasn't. Stuff that's worked for me might not work for you, but stuff you do might work for someone else, right? So I think it's worth sharing all this stuff, sharing all the discoveries we make. Oh, and I said I had some exciting news. If you've been watching this channel and if you're interested in this content, I actually wrote a book to basically take some of my ideas and get it just in written form, something that's kind of consumable, all of these ideas that are more broadly consumable. I've actually got a proof copy of the paperback here. It's called Strength Through Pain. There's a big line across it says not for resale. That is because this is a proof copy, but it will be available through Amazon paperback and ebook, and that is going to be available on the 4th of March, so just under a month from now. It is available for pre-order at the moment. If you search, I'll put a link or something in the description. But if you're interested in this content, please check it out. Hopefully it will provide some value. It's pretty short. It's like 160 pages. I wanted to write something that was very consumable, so even if you're not into reading, that you can get through it pretty quickly and hopefully take away some good answers or insights. I talk about the things that I talk about here: eat, sleep, walk, move, lift, breathe. Those things are all kind of covered. I also talk about my own personal journey a bit in that kind of a journey of discovery. And like I said, you need to figure this stuff out for yourself. So I wanted to share my journey so that you can kind of think about your journey and maybe think about, where you want to go from here. Anyway, this video has gone on long enough. Thank you very much for watching and catch you in the next one.